Hey, welcome to Whitefields Community Church Sermon Extra. It's great to have you with us once again this week. And I'm here with Sean Gilliam, who shared with us chapter 3 of 1 Thessalonians as we continue through our series called Upside Down, a study through 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. And Sean shared with us chapter 3 and the sermon, of course, was entitled, Who Do You Love, right?
Yep.
And if you haven't heard it, you can go find it there on whitefieldschurch.com and download that. And great job on Sunday morning. Thanks so much, Sean. And this chapter really kind of highlights a lot about the humanity of the gospel. And Paul talked about, in chapter 7 of chapter 2, verse 7, chapter 2, but we were gentle among you, like nursing mother taking care of her own children. And just that thing of Paul's heart really came out in this particular chapter.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things that we talked about, and one of the things that was somebody approached you with afterwards, after the sermon, kind of a response to your sermon, is just how intentional the gospel, how intentional Christianity is. And you want to just elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so when you look at the story here in chapter 3, you see it clearly evident, Paul's love for the Thessalonians. You see the love and response to Paul from the Thessalonians. And all this is because all parties involved are actively walking by the Spirit. They have an active fellowship with God. They're studying His Word. They're in communion with one another. They're in communion with God. And so out of that, as the Spirit works in our lives, it flows with love and peace and joy and the other fruits of the Spirit. And so it's clearly evident in this text here that that's what's happening. In talking with some people after the service, some of them did have questions or commented that I made the remark that the Christian life is it's intentional. And by that I meant, we don't just get saved, have heaven to look forward to, and try to be more good than bad, but just otherwise sit back on autopilot and just go about daily life doing what we want to do and hoping to get more things, that kind of thing. The Christian life is one of walking with God. It's intentional in that we draw near to Him, and there's promises with that. If we draw near to God, He draws near to us. If we walk by the Spirit, we won't carry out the desires of the flesh. And so we'll bear those fruits of the Spirit. And it's a beautiful promise. It's a beautiful thing in that as we have this fellowship with God in our daily lives, it produces joy. There's a real relationship going on there as we walk with God and get to know Him more and see Him at work in our lives when we're praying for things and we see Him give us direct answers, whether it's yes or no, but we can see His hand at work in things. And that right there, it just makes the relationship all the more real and satisfying, as opposed to walking in the flesh, where oftentimes we just get focused on our daily routine. We don't really think about God. We know we probably should pray or read the Bible at times, but we don't, and so we're just laden with guilt. And again, we try to do more good than bad, but because we feel guilty a lot of times, we'll kind of avoid God or think He's displeased with us and not interested in us, that kind of thing. And that's just fleshly-minded thinking. The real truth of the matter is God knows we're sinners. He knows we're weak, and He knows that the only way that we can live this Christian life is by fellowship with Him, by trusting in Him, by relying on Him for the strength to do so. And so it behooves us to not walk with God, because otherwise we're going to be experiencing all the negatives associated with just walking in sin. And of course, I think by default, that's what we tend to do. And so that's why we need to actively pursue God in our daily lives, not as a 10-minute time of prayer and reading the Bible in the morning. That's great if you're doing that, but it needs to be something throughout the day. God invites us to have fellowship with Him, to pray to Him and to cast all our cares on Him because He cares for us. He loves us. So it just makes perfect sense for us to just have a life of walking with Him.
Yeah, one of those, I think, in Paul's prayer there at the end of chapter 3, one of the ways we can really intentionally live as Christians is to abound more and more in love for one another.
Yeah.
Especially they, of course, they were, Paul was afraid that their faith had slipped because of the affliction, and all of the things, the church that was born, born already, a lot against them, and that they had to fight through a lot of things. And he's like, you got to abound more and more in love, and that's one of the ways we can intentionally live as Christians. And so yeah, if you haven't. Again, if you haven't downloaded or heard the sermon, get over there, whitefieldschurch.com, and we'll be looking at chapter 4 next time. We're glad you're with us in this series. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and we also now have a podcast on Spotify, which you can subscribe to, and of course, they'll just dump it in your playlist as each new episode comes available. So always welcome your suggestions, your questions. We look forward to seeing you again. God bless.
God bless. Take care.